I would like to mention that after my presentation we have another 3 presentations for this session, and then we have a lunch. Today we will speak about Jūra. For me, the only real masterpiece of orchestral music that Lithuania has, that we can compare it with Metastasis of Xenakis or Atmosphere of Ligeti. Just a small introduction. Čiurlionis went to study composition, music composition in Warsaw. Then he composed his first, he composed his first symphonic poem, which was finished with the name Miške, in the forest. This is the first page of the manuscript. The speciality of my first postdoc is the edition, the critical edition of manuscripts of 18th and 19th century. My dear wife, that was with my daughter in the morning here, so my daughter really managed to stay calm for 2 hours, okay, for a small child, it's a big, achievement. Introduced me to the music of Čiurlionis. She was the head of the music theory department for at least 10 years. I was the first foreigner that held to their hands the manuscript of the national work of Lithuania, Miške, in the forest. So I found astonishingly many aspects of the music of many aspects of this manuscript that we cannot see to the modern editions that we perform. So, going now forward, Čiurlionis went to Warsaw once more to study painting, and at the same time started to make sketches and short scores in Lithuanian claviras of his second symphonic poem with the name Jūra, the sea. Now I would like to describe you the sources that we have. Firstly, we have the point number 2 that we see here, the full score of the first 125 bars with pencil. Then Čiurlionis decided that he stops here, does something else, and then starts again to rewrite everything and finish the score. Additionally to that, we have everything, almost every bar of this masterpiece, in the form of a short score, Lithuanian claviras. And of course, we have extended sketches of this piece and sketches, short sketches. So that's an ideal situation for a musicologist who deals with authenticity of manuscripts of this time. We have now the first edition that was re-instrumentated by Edward Balsis, and according to this I will speak a little bit later, and the later edition by Petrones, which proclaims that it is according to the manuscript, but it isn't, and we will see that in a couple of minutes. So this is now the program of the first performance of Čiurlionis. During this concert, we have already the first distortions of the score. A person with a name very famous Lithuanian, Bacavičius, made some of the premiere. We see that it is really the most significant work in our literature, says Mr. Jakubenas. It says that it was not well rehearsed, and of course there were many parts of it that of course they didn't function very well. A couple of years later, he speaks that now Dvarionas, the conductor, gets the groove. So even parts of it with the name The Tempest, Odra, we will discuss also about this at the end, they were really now sounding better and less chaotic. So we established, together with Professor Keefe and Professor Donoravic, as I've said before, the complete works of Čiurlionis. And now we finished with Miške, the first symphonic poem, and we already performed it 3 times abroad. So now I will show you how really the editors can influence a piece in a very radical way. If you check here the bar 28 of Mishke, this is the first edition that we have from Professor Makatsinos. We see at the bar 28 says poco animato, so it becomes faster. For the next 7 minutes, it becomes faster. So, poco animato. The score of 2000 writes mosso and on brackets poco animato. That means, in the terminology, that the composer wrote everywhere mosso poco animato, mosso poco animato, mosso poco animato. And then he forgot to write poco animato, so we added. So check now the manuscript. It says only mosso. And this is not the handwriting of Giulionis. So there is another part later that says a tempo, but in the reality it's a tempo primo. So that means you listen your national piece of symphonic music, 40% of it faster than it should be mosso. So the manuscript version, critically edited by my person, was performed by Miga Gražinite 3 times. At the same time, like Dvarionas, she got the groove of this piece at the last concert in Philharmonie de Paris. You see what kind of orchestras performed the manuscript version of Giulionis. I was in all 3 performances, and the musicians and the public, they were amazed of this piece. Going back now to Jūra. We see the famous Tarim Piro, and as you see here, at the beginning of 1903 and 1906, it sounds a little bit like the beginning of the 9th Symphony of Beethoven. So there is a big, process so as to come to this Tarim Piro that everybody knows. So this is now the first score of the first 125 bars. And this is the melody. And as you see, just only one flute. Just only one flute, no clarinet. This is the score, the manuscript. And then here, as you see, we have also an additional clarinet. So at the according to the composer, the beginning of the piece consists only of one instrument. Okay, not 2, not with a clarinet. So this is the handwriting of Vytautas Bacevičius. In the 30s, they performed for the first time Jūra, but they didn't have organ. So Professor Bacevičius transposed the part of organ to other instruments. But as you see here, there is no organ. So 80% of the editings of Bacevičius have nothing to do with organ. Now I would like to stay for 2 minutes here because I am an instrumentator. On contrary to Vytautas Landsbergis, pianist, and Darius Kučinskas, pianist, I am an instrumentator, a composer. I teach instrumentation at my University of Graz. So this is an instrumentational blunder, what you see here. If you are a British American conductor and you see this, you will think the flute, when the flute plays the last 2 notes, will not be listened. You will listen only the clarinet. There is no need to add the flute here. But if you omit the clarinet, because the name is Jūra, the C, and you listen the first 2 notes, tarim, tim, and then the last note, the note B, is a note that you need an extra key to play, which means after the 5th row you will not listen. So imagine the C, and all of a sudden you know, Baltios Jūra, in front of you some waves are occurring, a white line occurs and then disappears. So this could be this. So it's an instrumentational diamond if you have only the flute. And if you add the clarinet, additionally, you have an instrumentational blunder. Parenthesis closed. So this is the second and the third page. His friend Moravsky rewrote those first 125 bars. Maybe Giulionis didn't have time for that. Giulionis takes the score that his friend assisted him and add some parts of it with pencil. As you see here, there is no organ, and those are the additings of Batsavicius. So they create a sound which is thicker, a sound that goes to the direction of the 19th century instrumentation, and without those we have an instrumentation that goes to the 20th century. So here is the score of 2000 from Petronis that proclaims that it is according to the manuscript, and as you see the blue parts are here. So it is a work of standardized work to exclude all additives. Imagine you have a painting of Giulionis and someone is assisting, drawing extra lines to the painting of Giulionis. But this is not Giulionis. You cannot proclaim that this is the original Giulionis. If you restore it, somehow magically you need to erase those lines and those colors. So we have here at the right side the instrumentation of Professor Balsis. As maybe some of you know, in the 50s, Professor Balsis was commissioned by the Soviet Party to re-instrumentate the music of Jūra, because it didn't fulfill the guidelines of the Soviet realism. So what has he done, for example, at this part? He added a new tempo. He added timpani. He added an additional melody. He added the same melody 2 octaves higher. So he has done a massive instrumentational, let's say, attack to this piece. And at the end we have an instrumentation that looks to the first half of 19th century and not to the direction of the 20th century. So we have here Giulionis, and we have now Batsavicius that added, distorted the score in the 20s. So we have here Professor Balsis that attacks the piece. Professor Landsbergis, a couple of years ago, during a presentation of one book of him, proclaimed that there is a secret protocol that shows that the party forced Professor Balsis to re-instrumentate the piece, because in the way that Giulionis wrote it, composed it, it was far too modern for that time in the Soviet Republic, USSR. So we, from the complete works, that's the job that I'm doing now, I omit all possible additings, and as an instrumentator, I assure you, this is an instrumentational diamond. You listen to Jūra in the version of Balsis, and of course I know many of Lithuanians that say, I don't like this piece. After 5 minutes I'm bored. So you're correct, because you don't listen to the original. Now, in a couple of months, the Philharmonia of Vilnius will organize for me a rehearsal so as they to perform the score according to the manuscript version, so as to find the mistakes of mine and the mistakes of Giulionis. And Mirga Gražinite is now in contact with the Radio Symphony Orchestra of Paris to perform for the first time in history Jūra in its original form next August. Hopefully, finger crossed, that we will make it. So as you see here, I just add what Giulionis wrote. There is the second idea that, okay, we add articulation because Giulionis didn't write articulation. Okay, here, for example, to this melody, of course, there's no articulation. This is the score of Balsis with articulation and dynamics. This is the 2000 score that proclaims that it is the original version. As we see, not only he adds Batsavicius, he adds Balsis, and also the dynamics of Balsis. So the complete edition will have it in the way that Giulionis wanted. And now I will prove you, or I have strong evidence, that this is the way that it should be. Here is the first version of the first 125 bars, where we'll see this melody. And here we see articulation. And here we see a lot of articulation signs, legato. This is now the manuscript version, and we see those articulation signs. Here Čiurlionis rewrites the score, wants to add this yellow part with an articulation sign. So what can he do more? He adds articulation there where he wants to. So we follow what he shows us, and according to my side, which I'm an instrumentator and editor, it's all fine with that. So a little bit about the tempi. We have problems with the tempi. It's the tempo of his friend, and according to our guidelines we add it because it has been written during the time of Čiurlionis, and probably Čiurlionis accepted that. But then we have serious problems considering the sources. In one we have it as lento, one we have it as andante. It's a difficult, one of the most difficult parts of my job considering Jūra is what kind of tempi to add. The beginning of it, andante, firstly we see Balsi, secondly the 2000 score, and now we go to the bar 66 to 68 that I want to add something to the current research of this piece. You can read that the blue additions are from Professor Batsavicius, okay? But I want to show you here that it's not Batsavicius. This is it, and this is the same, and this is the handwriting of Jadwiga Čiurlionytė. So here we are really, it's a small indication what the protocol says, which I haven't read. I must say I don't have this protocol, that the sister of the composer was very depressed during this meeting, that the good old guys, you know, they were changing the manuscript in the way that was very painful for her. So she needed to insert even herself added things to this piece, maybe that even though she didn't want to. I know the handwriting of Čiurlionytė because I am the person who rewrote for the first time the version of Jūra for four hands. Rokas Zubovas with his wife performed this piece several times in several continents. So we have this part, the second part of Jūra with tom taram pom pim, tom param pom pim, and as we see here there is no tempo indication from Čiurlionis. So we play maybe far too slow the beginning and far too fast this part. Maybe there is somewhere in the middle a tempo, and maybe some of you know the piece well, and here there comes this piatti, this psh, psh. This is not from Čiurlionis. This is editing of Batsavicius, because Batsavicius liked so much this piatti, inserted them to the music. So something personal, subjective. I leave now my objectivity of a scientist, and I enter the subjectivity of an artist. I am a composer of contemporary music. When I listened this first time in my life, 6-7 years ago, I heard those piatti, and I said, why does he imitate Puccini? It makes it boring. So then when I saw at the museum for my own eyes that those piatti were additions of Batsavicius, then I felt somehow closer to Čiurlionis. When I heard Miške for the first time, and in this mosso that I told you before, when I heard it, I said, why we left now the forest? Why are we in a dance club of 1850 in Vienna where they were playing Strauss? So where's the forest? So when I saw that this mosso was an addition, then I understood. I heard this piece 5 times in the manuscript version. I can assure you, all musicians, everybody from the public said, we are the whole time in the forest. So now a little bit about the tempest, just to conclude. These are 7 motifs, okay, with different colors. This is the score of this tempest part in Lithuanian Audra. This is the first motif, the second motif, the third motif, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, the seventh. As you see, we are just one step before Ligeti. So what do you think that Balsis has done when he was forced to change the instrumentation? Do you have any ideas? He removed it. Thank you for your attention. That was 25 minutes.
Well, okay, thank you, Haris. That was really very instructive. But I'd like to ask, again, I give myself the floor for the first question. If I understood correctly, your only source is this one manuscript. No other manuscripts, no published scores even in parts, or?
Only this.
Nothing. So, okay. Yeah, so actually you have to do some conjecturing.
Yeah. That's why
he may have changed his mind but not entered it. He may have made an accidental mistake or something.
That's why we have the rehearsal on November, October, to check not only my mistakes of the score, but also the mistake of Čiurlionis. During the process of checking the manuscript version of mine from Miške, from the first, we found at least 12 mistakes of the composer. So yeah. we corrected those 12 mistakes. So I suppose here this piece is 5 or 6 times bigger. There must be at least 100 mistakes of the composer. So we need to find them. Many of them I found, but not all of them. Really, when you listen such a piece, only then you can detect the mistakes.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Other questions then? Simon, have a microphone.
To the microphone, please.
Thank you so much, Karis. We've obviously had the privilege of talking about both Miške and Jūra before, and of course I've seen the manuscripts as well with you, which was wonderful 18 months ago. I mean, the thing that I find absolutely fascinating, and I think this in a way captures so much of Čiurlionis going forwards and his kind of reception looking backwards as well, is that in fact the kind of work you're doing here has kind of 2 dimensions, I think, for 2 very different communities. On the one hand, you've got the classic situation now of being able to say that here in Lithuania, we know this work, we've known it in the wrong kind of way because of all these mistakes, all of these additions, all of these accruals, and that's absolutely significant in all kinds of ways here. Looking to the West, though, where, as we all know, Čiurlionis is not anywhere near as well known as we all wish he were, and will want him to be in the future, you've got a sense that actually that issue to some degree won't resonate in the same way. But what actually will resonate is the fact that you've got these different types of Soviet intervention, right? In all kinds of ways, and in different eras as well. You've got the kind of Bacevich, in Stalin era. You've obviously got the Balsis in a much later era. And you've got this sense of intervention and muddling around with it and messing around with it for various ideological reasons, which I think actually, in all kinds of ways, even if the West, so to speak, is not familiar with Čiurlionis' music, would be absolutely kind of fascinating. Almost what would be ideal, actually, in a Western context, would be to get the performances that you're issuing, which was fantastic in Birmingham, the one I listened to. Sadly, I couldn't make it there in the end because of train strikes that we had in the UK. But otherwise I would have been there. But to get that kind of performance alongside the old versions, which are really so quite clearly from the evidence of the primary sources, so messed around with. So I mean, I think it's more an observation than a question, but I think it's absolutely fascinating that what you've uncovered actually has resonances in different ways with different communities.
Yep. And as I have said before, just a second, this protocol that Landsberg speaks about, I haven't seen. Okay, as a scientist, I must say that I don't have this protocol that proves that the Soviet Party forced Professor Balsi. So this I must mention. Please.
Taip, aš lietuviškai gal paklausiu.
Pirmiausia, tai labai ačiū už tokį darbą.
Aš suprantu lietuviškai, bet ne viską.
Gerai. Pirmiausia, tai fantastiškas jūsų darbas, jau pristatėte pernai metais šitą idėją, reiškia, atnaujinti tos, reiškia, pirminę versiją. Ir, sakyčiau, Čiurlionio yra paradoksas, kad jo arba trūksta, arba jo yra per daug, reiškia, arba vienoje vietoje kažkur kaip laiškas, reiškia, iš mūsų atėmė kažkas, arba kažkur tai prirašė, pripaišė, reiškia, tai kas tas yra autentiškas Čiurlionis, mums dar reikės, reiškia, arba atrasti ir pridėti, arba nuimti ir irgi atrasti, ar ne? Aš norėjau paklausti, ar jūs jau girdėjote šitą naują versiją ir jeigu taip, reiškia, bent jau kažkokiose pradinėse repeticijose, ir jeigu taip, kaip įvardytumėte skirtumą tarp ankstesnės ir šios naujos versijos? Tiesiog muzikinė klausa.
Thank you so much. The newest version we haven't heard yet, but we have a recording of the Petronis version, which is without Balsis but with Patsavichus. And we have all those recordings that you know of Balsio, of Balsis, Jūra. Clearly, for me, it was an improvement what I heard in the last recording. Now I can tell you that Mirko Gražnytė performed this Petronis version with City of Birmingham Orchestra. And she told me that she didn't like it. The musicians didn't like it. And she was sure that there must be something more with this score. That was the time before I dealt with Jūra and with Miške. So as we discussed about it, she felt really it was a difficult to explain. She understood that she was right, that it must be here something with a piece. Okay. From the other side, I must say, a small critic, not considering the musicologist, but considering the conductors. There was not even one conductor that have done what I have done. Just call the ladies that are so nice at the museum, that they provided me with all possible manuscripts. And just go there, just take the train or the car to Kaunas. Phone the ladies and they will show you Jūra. So that's why now I digitized all manuscripts, and now slowly they are starting to be online at this Čiurlionis.eu. So the version, the manuscript version of Jūra is already online. You can check for yourself. So that's also something that I needed to do so as this to become more open to the public. But nevertheless, none of the conductors check the manuscript because they are instrumentators. They could see immediately. Landsbergis and Kučinskas, they are pianists. They cannot. So I am the third person that deals so deeply with this material, and I can assure you that I didn't know anything about Balsis and the reasons. And when I saw the manuscript, I said, why to change something? You know, why to change the team that this team wins? Why to change the players of a team that wins? Thank you. I think now if I'm becoming the moderator of the next session, now we must.
No more questions?
Just a short question. Now I became the moderator of the next session. Yeah.
I just wanted to check. So the manuscript is not ruined, not changed. It's the original. So what is changed is just the printed later versions, right?
Yes, and as you have seen, there were several people that they were adding, you know, on the score all possible stuff with pen, with pencil, with red pen, with blue pen, with
on the original.
On the original. So Landsbergis, because I know him, I met him at least 5 times at his home, and we were discussing about Jūra also. Was fascinated and still remembers. Sometimes he forgets my name, but he remembers what I have said. Why to do some additives to such a diamond on the score with a pen? do it with a pencil or something.
So for musicologists, it's possible to see the original version, right?
It's everything pretty clear.